All right, well, let's turn our Bibles to Genesis 34. Genesis 34. Looks like Raymond's already there, so he's a step ahead. Keep him a marker in there. That's good. Know where we're at. Genesis 34, a little bit of review here. In verses 1 through 12, we found Jacob's daughter Dinah, and she is hanging out with the daughters of the land. And we noted that that's not a positive thing in the Bible. Whenever you have the people in the land, it's kind of like the world today, the world system. And so, according to their native culture of the daughters of the land, Prince Shechem came and took Dinah, and according to God's standard, he misused Dinah, and he falls in love with Dinah, and he keeps Dinah. And then he goes to Jacob and to Dinah's brothers and asks for her hand in marriage. And we noted in verse number 5, it says that of chapter 34, it says, "And Jacob heard that Shechem had defiled Dinah his daughter. Now his sons were with his cattle in the field, and Jacob held his peace until they were come." And so Jacob remained silent on this whole thing. And so Shechem is a pagan, he is a heathen, he is a Hivite, and these Hivites operate on different rules than God's people. And I've always thought that Shechem, he was just acting like Hivites act. And I've never really placed a lot of blame on him for doing what he did to Dinah, because he was unsaved, he was not a believer in God, and he did not follow God's laws. And I think that perhaps, kind of like, what's that guy in Beauty and the Beast, that real tough guy, Gaston. You know, all the girls wanted to be Gaston's girl in Beauty and the Beast. I would say all the girls there in Shechem would want to be Shechem's wife. And so they're probably telling Dinah, this is a great thing. This is wonderful. He's chosen, of all the girls, he's chosen you. But according to God's law, it's not right to have sexual relations before you're married. And it's not right to marry someone who's not a believer in God. And so in those two ways, this was a no-no for God's people. So we come to verse number 13, and it says, "And the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and Hamor, his father, deceitfully, and said, because he had defiled Dinah, their sister." Deceitfully means treacherously. At this point, for whatever reason, Jacob is out of the picture. Remember, he remained silent. He would not take a stand. And so what we see here is Shechem and Hamor, instead of dealing with Jacob, are now dealing with Jacob's sons. They're dealing with Dinah's brothers. And they are furious at how Shechem has treated their baby sister. They are furious. And so in verses 14 through 18, they said unto them, and this is Jacob's sons speaking to Shechem and Hamor, "We cannot do this thing, to give our sister to one that is uncircumcised, for that were a reproach unto us. But in this will we consent unto you, if you will be as we are, that every male of you be circumcised, then will we give our daughters unto you, and we will take your daughters to us, and we will dwell with you, and we will become one people. But if you will not hearken unto us to be circumcised, then will we take our daughter, and we will be gone." And their words pleased Hamor and Shechem, Hamor's son. And so Jacob's sons are acting deceitfully. They're acting treacherously, as that word means. And so they lay out a condition. And that is, if you want to have Dinah, and if you want to become one people, and you want to share your women with us, and we'll share our women with you, you share your wealth with us, we'll share our wealth with you, then there's one condition. All of your men must be, like the children of Israel, circumcised. Now, when the children of Israel were circumcised, the males, it was when they were, less than 2 weeks old. I mean, they were really young. And it's not as painful of a procedure at that point. But for adults, it is a painful, disabling surgery, especially back then without anesthetics and modern tools of doctoring. However, Shechem loves Dinah, and Hamor, we're going to see, has also plans to eventually finagle the Israelites out of their wealth and their women. And so they say that is a small price to pay. We will agree to do this. Okay, so what is going to happen? Verse 19, and the young man deferred not to do the thing, because he had delight in Jacob's daughter, and he was more honorable than all the house of his father. The idea of him being more honorable means that he was held in high esteem in the Hivite community. And he loved Dinah, and so he was able to persuade these men, hey, Dinah's a great girl. They have a lot of women over there in the Israelites, and we are going to have those women if we just get circumcised. Okay, verses 20 through 24. What happens? And Hamor and Shechem, his son, came into the gate of their city, which is where these cities conducted business. You remember Lot sat in the gate of Sodom, which means he was part of the leadership there in Sodom. And it says, and communed with the men of the city, saying, these men are peaceable with us. Therefore let them dwell in the land and trade therein. For the land, behold, it is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters to us for wives, and let us give them our daughters. Only herein will the men consent unto us, for to dwell with us, to be one people, if every male among us be circumcised as they are circumcised. Shall not their cattle and their substance and every beast of theirs be ours? Only let us consent unto them, and they will dwell with us. And unto Hamor and unto Shechem his son hearkened all that went out of the gate of the city, and every male was circumcised, all that went out of the gate of his city. And so the people believed Hamor, believed Shechem, when they said, if we just take on this rite of circumcision, then everything the children of Israel has will eventually be ours. And I want to say this here, because I think this is a valid point, and that is whenever the world cozies up to the church, it's because they want something for themselves. If the world wants to give the church something, supposedly, if the world wants to help the church, supposedly, then it's always because the world wants something from the church. Now, this is one thing that at our church in Virginia, you don't have to be incorporated, which means as a church, we do not have to register with the state. And that's something we at Calvary have chosen to do, is to not be incorporated, because we don't want to in any way be under the thumb of the Commonwealth of Virginia. We don't want to receive any government funding. Calvary used to have a Christian school back in the early 90s and in the 80s, and we never took any government funding. Because if you ever take government funding, what does that come with? Government regulations. And so whenever the world wants to do something for the church or give something to the church, it's because they expect something in return, and it's a trap. And we see here Hamor and we see Shechem admitting, look, if we just do this one thing and all of our men are circumcised, then eventually everything they have will be ours. They want to destroy the identity and take the wealth of the people of God. That's what's in their hearts. And they want to take the women as well of the people of God. All right, so verses 25 through 29. Remember, the sons of Jacob were acting how? Deceitfully, treacherously. And so we're going to see what that means. Verse 25 and following. And it came to pass on the third day when they were sore. And so they were sore from their surgeries. All the men, remember, all the fighters. That two of the sons of Jacob, Simon and Levi, Dinah's brethren, took each man his sword and came upon the city boldly and slew all the males. And they slew Hamor and Shechem his son with the edge of the sword, and took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went out. The sons of Jacob came upon the slain and spoiled the city, because they had defiled their sister. They took their sheep, their oxen, their asses, and that which was in the city, and that which was in the field, and all their wealth, and all their little ones, and their wives took they captive, and spoiled even all that was in the house. And so while the male citizens of Shechem were recovering from their painful surgeries, Simon and Levi came in, killed all the men, took the women, took the children, and took the wealth of the city of Shechem for themselves. And in the process, in verse number 26, they rescued their sister Dinah. Now, in verse number 30, we see Jacob's reaction to this. Remember in verse number 5, Jacob was what? He was silent. He refused to do anything about this treachery, this defilement of his daughter Dinah. He hesitated to do what was right. And he says in verse number 30, Jacob said to Simon and Levi, "You have troubled me to make me to stink among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites. And I, being few in number, they shall gather themselves together against me and slay me, and I shall be destroyed, I and my house." Jacob didn't say to Simon and Levi, "Good job, fellas. We defended the honor of your sister. Good job." No. He was upset by how Simon and Levi conducted themselves, because such treachery, he says, quote, "will make me to stink among the inhabitants of the land, and I shall be destroyed, I and my house." In other words, Jacob saw the bigger picture, and that is, okay, we destroyed this city of Shechem to rescue your sister, but now everybody in the land thinks we're a bunch of covenant breakers and thinks we're liars, and everybody in the land hates us. They hate us, and they're going to destroy us. Well, Simon and Levi, they were young men, impetuous young men, and so in verse number 31 they said, "Should he deal with our sister as with a harlot? Are you going to let him just get away with treating our sister this way?" And like I've said before, and I think something maybe Jacob realized, and that is, I don't think that Dinah, by going with the daughters of the land, was completely innocent in this. I think that she was hanging around with the wrong crowd, and she was being influenced by their philosophies, their way of life. And I think that Jacob understood that Shechem, even though he had done wrong, that he wasn't acting out of malice. He was just acting according to his culture. And so Jacob, as the older man, was willing to kind of see that, we need to think about and pray about what we're going to do about this situation. But Levi and Simon were young men. They weren't thinking about the future. They weren't thinking about the consequences. They were just thinking about how this man had defiled their daughter Dinah. Their daughter is always right. Their sister is always right. She's never wrong. These Hivites are always wrong. They're never right. And they went in and killed all the men, spoiled the city, and now everybody in the area hates the children of Israel. So here's the question at the end of this chapter. What would have been a better way to handle this situation on the part of Jacob and his sons. Anybody want to make a suggestion? You have a quiet group today. I think in verse number 5, if Jacob had been upfront with Shechem and dealt with the sin head on, rather than being silent and avoiding the situation, I think things could have been better off. You know what would have been great? You know, Shechem had done this awful thing to Dinah, and it was an awful thing. Anytime that there is, sexual relations outside of marriage, it is an abominable thing. And Shechem was not a believer, and so it was a double abomination. Jacob could not give in good conscience his daughter Dinah to Shechem. And yet, let's think about this a different way. What if Jacob had said to Shechem, according to our God, according to the God of heaven and earth, you have committed a grave sin. You've defiled our daughter. You've defiled yourself. And even though the law wasn't written down at this point, adultery or sexual activity outside of marriage was still a sin. It just had not been codified. It hadn't been written down yet. Joining with someone who is not a believer, even though it had not been written down and codified, it was still a sin. And so if Jacob had been the man and had confronted Shechem about his sin, who knows? But that perhaps Shechem and Hamor would have converted to follow the true God. And who knows but that whole little city might have become followers of Jehovah. And that instead of having this bloodshed and all of this having a bad reputation in the community, instead they could have lived in peace. And yes, even though that marriage would have started out on the wrong note, it could have ended up being something where God and his grace could be glorified. And here's the point. When good and godly men fail to act, bad men will always step in and fill the void. And that's exactly what happened. Jacob failed to be the man. He failed to be the patriarch. He failed to be the head of the family. He failed to be the priest of God in his family. And Simon and Levi came in, acted impetuously, and did not do right in this situation. It may have come down to that. If Shechem had refused to convert, and if Shechem had refused to give Dinah back, then they might have had to go to war with this little city. But to trick this city the way they did, dealing treacherously with them, this wasn't godly. This wasn't good. And I think it all comes down to Jacob refusing to be the man, refusing to be the father, and refusing to act in this situation. Any thoughts? Any questions? Any comments? That's my opinion about what should have happened. Verse 5 is when it all started going downhill. All right, so chapter 35. They've got to get out of Dodge. The people in that area now don't trust them. People in that area don't like them. And so chapter 35, verse 1. And God said unto Jacob, Arise, go up to Bethel, and dwell there, and make there an altar unto God that appeared unto thee when thou fleddest from the face of Esau thy brother. Go up to Bethel, dwell there, build you a little church there. Well, congregation. Church, we believe didn't start as a church until Pentecost. But have a little congregation there. Have a place where you can sacrifice. Have a place where you can pray and worship together. What's so significant about Bethel? Well, we see here in verse number 2, Then Jacob said unto his household and to all that were with him, Put away the strange gods among you, and be clean, and change your garments. Let us arise and go up to Bethel, and I will make there an altar unto God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and was with me in the way which I went. And so what happened there at Bethel? Well, we see here that God appeared unto Jacob when he was fleeing from Esau, his brother, and Esau's wrath. Go back to chapter 28. of Genesis. We're going to see that here. Beginning of verse number 10. Here Jacob is going, leaving his father's house. And it says, and Jacob, verse 10 of chapter 28, went out from Beersheba and went toward Haran. And he lighted upon a certain place and tarried there all night, because the sun was set. And he took of the stones of that place and put them for his pillows, and lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven, and behold, the angels of God ascending and descending on it. That ladder, or that stairway, as some people describe it, is a type of the Lord Jesus Christ. He is our go-between, between heaven and earth. Verse 13, and behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham thy father, the God of Isaac. The land whereon thou liest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed. And thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and thou shalt spread abroad to the west, to the east, to the north, to the south. And in thee and in thy seed shall all families of the earth be blessed. In thy seed shall all families of the earth be blessed. Who is that seed? Jesus. His descendant, the Lord Jesus Christ, singular, is going to be a blessing to all the people of the earth. And behold, I am with thee, and will keep thee in all places whither thou goest, and will bring thee again into this land, for I will not leave thee until I have done that which I have spoken to thee of. And Jacob awaked out of his sleep, and he said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I knew it not. He was afraid and said, how dreadful is this place? How awesome is this place? This is none other but the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. And Jacob rose up early in the morning, and took the stone that he had put for his pillows, set it up for a pillar, and poured oil upon the top of it. And he called the name of that place Bethel, but the name of that city was called Luz at the first. And so there it is, the significance of this place. And that is that this is where God appeared to Jacob as he was fleeing from his brother Esau and leaving his mother Rebekah and his father Isaac. And this is the place where God promised to Jacob that he would be the one through whom God would keep his covenant and through whom God would give the Messiah, the seed of the woman, and that is Jesus, the one who came as Jesus. And so back in our text, chapter 35, verses 2 and 3, since they are heading to Bethel, the house of God, Jacob instructs everyone with him to get rid of their foreign gods, to wash up, and to put on some clean clothes. Now, what are these foreign gods referring to? Well, one possibility is it could be referring to his wife Rachel. Remember, she had taken these strange gods, these foreign gods, from her father, stolen them. Back in chapter 31, beginning verse 30, why have you stolen my gods? Laban says to Jacob. Jacob said, verse 32, whomsoever thou findest thy gods, with whomsoever thou findest thy gods, let him not live. Before our brethren discern thou what is thine with me, and take it to thee. For Jacob knew not that Rachel had stolen them. And Laban went into Jacob's tent, into Leah's tent, and into the two maidservants' tents, but he found them not. Then went he out of Leah's tent and entered into Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the images and put them in the camel's furniture and sat on them. And Laban searched all the tent, but found them not. She said to her father, let it not displease my lord that I cannot rise up before thee, for the custom of women is upon me. And he searched, and he found not the images. And so when Jacob says, let's get rid of all the foreign gods, first of all, his own wife stole some of these strange gods from her daddy, Laban. But also, in verses 27 through 29 of chapter 34, we see Simon and Levi going into Shechem and doing what? Spoiling the city. And some of the spoils of their destruction of that city, there could have been some foreign gods in those spoils. And so, it says in verse 4 of chapter 35, "And they gave unto Jacob all the strange gods which were in their hand, and all their earrings which were in their ears. And Jacob hid them under the oak which was by Shechem." And so I'm not going to go in a rabbit trail about earrings. I think that the earrings themselves were not the problem. But in that culture, perhaps the earrings were associated with paganism, with the pagan culture. Perhaps the earrings were associated with pagan gods in that culture, or perhaps both. We don't really know. Some of the archaeologists I was studying for this have found earrings on idols, on false gods in that area. And so for whatever reason, these earrings were associated with paganism and perhaps pagan idolatry as well. And so Jacob took all these foreign gods, these false idols, and hid them under the oak which was by Shechem. And what an archaeological find that would be. To find these gods made of gold, these gold earrings, underneath this oak tree in Shechem. Now the sad thing is, this oak tree is probably dead and gone by now. But if you could find this archaeological find, that would be quite a bit of loot that you would find under where this tree used to stand. 35, verse number 5, it says, "And they journeyed, and the terror of God was upon the cities that were round about them, and they did not pursue after the sons of Jacob." Remember what Jacob was worried about in chapter 34, verse 30? He was worried that all the people in the area that he lived would gather themselves together, kill Jacob, destroy him and his home. Remember that, his house? Well, God put his fear in the hearts of the people who lived around Shechem, and they, because they had the fear of God in them, and because they knew that the Israelites were God's people, were not going to bother the Israelites. And so Jacob and his family was able to escape that area without any conflict. So verse number 6. "So Jacob came to Luz, which is in the land of Canaan, that is Bethel, he and all the people that were with him." And most scholars believe that the distance between Shechem and Bethel was probably 30 miles. And so in that day, that was a lot of distance to put between you and your enemies, that 30 miles. And so he gets to Bethel, and it says, "And he built there an altar, and called the place El Bethel, because there God appeared unto him when he fled from the face of his brother." He built there an altar. This is a place where Jacob and his family would make their sacrifices, the place where they would worship the one true God together. We go all the way back to Adam's son Seth, and it says with Seth had a son, and in his days they began to call upon the name of the Lord. And that's exactly what we see here, them meeting together and calling on the name of the Lord here at this altar. And so coming together as God's people to make a sacrifice and to worship the true God has been practiced ever since the beginning of time by God's people. And of course today we're not going to make a sacrifice here in the church. And why is that? Why is that? Huh? Yeah, the perfect sacrifice has already been made in the Lord Jesus Christ. So that's one change between Old Testament Israel and the New Testament church. And he called the name of the place El Bethel. El Bethel means the God of the house of God. Jacob had come back to where God appeared to him in the latter vision. It was simply Bethel, which means house of God. But now he is calling it El Bethel, which means the God of the house of God. Having become a child of God by faith, Jacob now exalts the God of this place and not simply the place itself. And so we will stop there for today, and we will continue on and see what happens there at El Bethel.